Today's episode is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at www.anxietydiariespodcast.com/audible. Hello, and welcome to Anxiety Diaries, a weekly podcast about mental health, incredible people, and so much more. I'm your host, Scott Neumeier, and this is episode 23. If you like what you hear, please make sure you subscribe. And if you get a chance, please head over to Apple Podcasts to rate and review the show. It really does help, and we really do appreciate it. Today on the podcast, we have KJ Dell'Antonia. She is a writer and a regular contributor to the New York Times, where she wrote and edited the Motherlode blog from 2011 until 2016, and was a contributing editor to the Well Family section from 2016 to 2017. Prior to this, she was one of Slate's X Factor bloggers and a contributor to Slate, where she covered parenting and a broad range of subjects from legal issues to pop culture. She is also the co-host of the popular #AmWriting podcast. KJ lives in Lyme, New Hampshire with her husband and 4 children. Her latest book is called How to Be a Happier Parent: Raising a Family, Having a Life, and Loving Almost Every Minute, and it's in stores everywhere on August 21st. To grab the audiobook for free and get a 30-day free trial of the Audible service, head over to www.anxietydiariespodcast.com/audible. On the podcast, we're going to talk about her incredible new book, the anxiety that she felt leaving her editorial position at the New York Times to become a freelancer. She's also going to provide some tips on dealing with anxious children. And finally, we'll talk about how happier parents lead to happier children, which leads to happier families. It's a really great conversation. I was really happy and lucky to be able to connect with KJ again. Her book is fantastic and it's in stores this week. Please make sure you check it out. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So without further ado, here's KJ. Welcome to the podcast, KJ. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm really looking forward to this.
It's nice to talk to you again. For those who may not know, KJ was my editor for a New York Times Motherlode piece I did about having our second child, and that was a fantastic experience. So this is
good.
This is awesome and a little extra sweet that I get to talk to you for this.
That's nice. When I joined the Times, I was not necessarily supposed to be such a huge editorial role as it became, and I turned out to really love editing. So I'm glad that you liked being edited by me.
The mark of a good editor for me is, do they make the piece better? And that piece became 100 times better having you work on it. So for me, that's a win. So for those who may not know, can you tell us a little bit about you and the book and what it is you do?
Sure. The book is called How to Be a Happier Parent: Raising a Family, Having a Life, and Loving Almost Every Minute. And it came about, so I, as a journalist, found myself writing about parenting starting way back when with Common Sense Media and working with friends to write a book about reading with children because children's literature was a huge interest in mine. And then I joined Slate early on and just found myself writing about parenting, not the personal stuff. Like I was never the sort of deuce blogger. It was more of this is the culture that we parent in. This is the society that we parent in. This is the policy that affects our parenting. And when I joined the Times, that was also what I was doing, as well as editing the personal essays. And over the course of, so many years of being a part of that world of journalism, I was both experiencing having this sort of crazy parenting running around and just feeling like all we ever did was sort of churn and drive and push. And it just wasn't the happy family thing that I was hoping for. And I realized as I edited and interviewed so many people that we were really not alone in that. And then it began to sort of hit the news in a big way. Parents, answer surveys and say they'd rather do laundry than be with their children. It was sort of a big thing about parents are less happy than people that don't have children. And then everybody got upset because of course we're happy about our children. And I just wanted to explore, okay, why do we have less feelings of happiness, why is it all joy and no fun, as Jennifer Senior put? But more relevantly, how can we fix that? How can we make that stop and start to feel better about this whole thing?
I love what you do in the book. I really do love this book so much. I think it kind of completes this holy trinity of parenting books alongside Jess Leahy's Gift of Failure and Catherine Perlman's Ignore It.
I love both of those.
They're both fantastic books, and and they're all brilliant, but with each their own type of format and take on parenting that you can glean things from. Yours is extremely practical in that it's broken out into sort of a top 10 things that are hardest for parents, and then you go through each one. How important was it for you to have this format that was both super readable and also extremely practical?
Well, I really wanted to be practical because, there's a lot of mindset involved in becoming happier, and mindset is important, and sort of doing these larger things around teaching yourself that happiness is important and being willing to be happy. Those are important things. But on the other hand, it's also like important to try to get your kids out of the house in the morning without screaming at them. And that isn't really something, mindset helps with that, but so does having a morning playlist or going to bed earlier or letting it be your kid's problem that they forget their lunch. I wanted to talk both about what we could do in our heads and what we could actually do. Like I wanted to be doing some of this, tomorrow. Yeah. I didn't want to be happier next year or happier when there's parent leave or happier when
you're 80.
Yeah, exactly. I get that there are things that I really want that our society to do to support family better besides just talking about how important we are and how, you better stay home with your kids because we're not going to help you have daycare or anything. But it'd be great if you had a fortune while you did it. I really want all that to change, but that's not what I wanted to do. Was talk about what we can do with the deck that we've got. Like, these are the cards we've been dealt. This is where we are. Let's make this good. Because really, if you look around, it is pretty good. For most of the readers of this book, you had enough money to spend on a book. You probably have, you have food, you got a roof, you got kids that are reasonably healthy, you got enough sort of time to read a book. And it's a pretty decent modern life that we've got going here.
The other thing I love about the book is the very relaxed approach you take. Instead of saying, this is what you have to do and do it all, you're much more of a, you do what you find works for you, to be happier. Was that a result of reading a lot of books that are constantly telling you what to do?
I think it's just, I don't actually know how anyone else should raise their kids, other than that I know that they should find a way to enjoy it and to make it work for them. So it's really, I don't like being told, specifically how to do something. And also, I'm just not wholly convinced. I am a crazy meal planner. I can tell you what we're having for dinner tonight. Usually I know because that makes me happy, but I totally get that for some people that would make you crazy. So there are other approaches to making mealtime happier. If this was just how to parent like me and be happier, I don't think it would necessarily work for very many people. Plus, I'm not always that happy, so I definitely needed some help.
It's very actionable though still. You're not telling people what to do. You're slightly giving suggestions of what may work for them, has worked for you, and that's still actionable to me. So it's still completely useful information, which is great.
I hope so. And it was really fun. And so I got to read the audiobook, which was such a cool experience. And as I read the chore chapter in particular, I was literally thinking in the back of my head, man, we gotta up our game again. Like, some of this we used to do and we don't do it anymore. And some of this advice I never really took. And this is good stuff.
Yeah.
So I went home, and that was a couple of months ago. And it's an ever iterating process. You don't deal with your 12-year-olds the way you dealt with your 4-year-olds. So there can't be just one right way to do it.
You mentioned in the book as well that this isn't really a memoir, and it's not.
Oh, no.
But there's plenty of you in there. Was there a conscious decision to try not to have any of you in there at some point? I really do feel like the book benefits from your perspective and kind of your reassurance throughout that you are happier now.
I am happier now. No, I think I'm in there sort of as much as felt right. It's funny because when I took on the Motherlode job, a big part of learning to do that was this sort of to find the proper balance between stories about me and my experience and the larger picture. And one of the things, I had a manifesto, and one of the lines was most Motherlode posts do not start with the letter I. My experience is sort of one thing, but I live in rural New England. I have 4 kids, not one. I am a working parent, but I have one of the most flexible jobs in the world. So, do I share that sort of working parent experience? I do. But do I share the one where you have to be at the hospital and you don't get to leave until 5:02? No, I don't. I really had to sort of both share where I've been and some of the things that have happened with my 4 kids that are pretty varied, but also bring in a whole lot of other stuff.
And bring in quotes from other people and not just experts, also just regular
parents.
People. I like that a lot because it does give you
Experts
the perspective.
Are great, but they're not going to tell you that. There's one guy who made a morning playlist that literally starts when the kids get up, but it's cued to time. So like at the moment when they need to stop eating breakfast and brush their teeth, X starts to play. And like by the end of another song, they have to be in the car car, they're going to be late. And no, there is no expert telling you to do that. I didn't do that, by the way, but I thought it was a brilliant idea. I'd kind of like to do that. That's what like alternative me in different universe, that's what she would do.
Yeah. In the beginning of the book, you provide these 10, I guess we'll call them mantras. So these mantras, they're kind of steps towards being a happier parent, and they inform what the subsequent chapters are. If you had to choose just the top 3, let's say the 3 most important ones in your opinion, which ones would you choose?
Let's see. You don't have to go in there. If you see something, don't always say something. And what you want now isn't always what you'll want later. I pick those.
I mean, I think they're a good summary of the triangle of how to find this happy space, right? Let them make mistakes, let them figure things out on their own, and things will get better, adapt.
That's one of the sort of the happier parent things that we found in the research that I actually did, as opposed to the research I read, which was large, was that parents who described themselves as happier who had younger kids, they were sort of more involved on a day-to-day level. They were doing little things, but parents who described themselves as happier who had older kids, they would report encouraging more independence. Like there were just sort of these two different chunks. Like they would say, I value my kid doing their such and such independently and that kind of thing. So there seems to be this sort of happier parent evolution from minutia involvement when they're small up to, well, good luck when they're bigger, on some things.
I'm feeling that right now. I have a 9-year-old and now a 2-year-old. So a 9-year-old who is totally self-sufficient, and now this 2-year-old who needs me for everything. So
you know what the hardest thing will be, though? Like treating that 2-year-old the way you treat this 9-year-old.
Right.
Because this 9-year-old, you're like, man, look at you. You can walk and cook eggs. You're practically an adult.
Yeah.
Here are the car keys. But the 2-year-old, because by that, the time that 2-year-old's 9, the 9-year-old is going to be, 17? You're going to be like, oh, honey, let me do that for you. You're so little and cute.
Right.
It's fine. I mean, I definitely have that experience because I have a pretty wide range of kids. And I'd look at my 12-year-old. I'm like, I'm pretty sure when your brother was 12, I mean, I know he was driving the tractor. I won't let you drive the tractor. So it's really hard.
It is, especially because their personalities are totally different. This one is wild and crazy, whereas the other one was very relaxed and kind of just chilled out. It's an interesting struggle, but a worthy one.
Somebody told me that if at some point your kids don't think you're being fair regarding like treating them differently than their siblings, then you're actually doing it wrong. They're supposed to think you're supposed to treat them differently.
You quote Bruce Feiler near the beginning of the book where he says you cannot write this book without talking about screen time. Everyone is trying to figure that out. Why do you think it's such a big piece of the puzzle now? Is it just because it's so ubiquitous, or is it because it's in school now, so there's really no escape? What is the mystery here?
I think there's a couple of things going on. First is that it's different. A lot of the ways in which our kids are experiencing life, they go to elementary school and it looks a lot like what we did, and we go to middle school and it looks a lot like what we did, but that is totally different. Like there is no one parenting today that grew up with an iPhone. So there's sort of that element of, wait, if you don't do what I did, how will you learn to be as successful as I am or as I want you to be? Like the way that I learned to be sociable with my friends was this. And if you're not doing that, how can I guarantee that you're going to be okay? So there's that. Then there's also this other piece of, we had this huge national conversation about how the devices and the screens and all of the things that go with them are affecting us as adults.
Right.
Are we texting when we drive? Are we looking at them? Are they interfering with our sleep? Are they interfering with our ability to get good ideas? Like Samaroti's book, do we use them when we ought to be spending time with our kids? Like we're having it's a struggle for us as adults to figure out where these things fit into our lives. So the fact that we haven't figured it out for ourselves makes it really hard for us to feel confident in teaching our kids to deal with them. And feeling confident about your abilities is actually how academics measure parental happiness. What they look at isn't so much whether you say you're happy, because that could have more to do with like whether or not your coffee is still hot.
Right.
They look at whether or not you say, well, yeah, I feel like I'm pretty good at this. I don't know that there are very many of us that feel like we're pretty good at figuring out how much Netflix we or our toddlers should watch.
It's true. And I never, until you just said it, I never thought of the perspective of, we model our children after how we grew up. If we grew up in a stable environment and things like that.
Yeah.
And we don't have that model. It's really interesting. It's like that was the piece of the puzzle that was missing from my perspective until now.
You got nothing to fall back on. Like, whatever your parents did with respect to various things, you might fall back on doing it like they did, or you might fall back on not doing it like they did. But at least you got something. With this, God, we had nothing. It's a real big open space, and big open spaces are scary when it comes to our, the little pieces of our heart that are running around outside of us.
Right. We may not be able to figure this out now then until these children are parents.
We may never feel like we figured it out. I feel pretty confident that it'll be okay.
Yeah.
Basically, I don't think we're raising a whole generation of people who won't know how to talk to each other. I think they're going to sort it out. Most of our teenagers, especially, the sort of terrifying conversation about teenagers and social media has grown to be very huge, but truly they're having that conversation.
Yeah.
Like they get it. They know that it's different, or they know that maybe they don't want to spend too much time on it. They know that they know it's a thing, and they're talking about it amongst themselves. And as they grow up and sort of make their own decisions, they're going to be sort of doing some of the same stuff we're doing, where we're like, well, I'm going to try to leave my phone plugged into the bedroom while I cook dinner just to see. And they'll be doing those things.
The more information they have, it's very much similar to what you say in the book about sleeping. If you teach them that, sleeping more is better for them, they will follow.
Right. And it doesn't work like I tell you sleeping more is better for you, and they go, oh, okay. And then they never break that.
Right.
That's not even how it works for us. Like, we know we need to get more sleep. We mostly don't. We know we need to spend less time on Instagram or whatever your personal social media drug of choice is, but sometimes we don't. We need to give our kids space to sort of be experiencing that and going through it, and not feel like every time this isn't sort of playing out perfectly as we've hoped. Every time we realize that our 12-year-old is on hour 7 of Fortnite, as mine probably is even as we speak, that we have totally and utterly failed. It's just that you gotta have more of a conversation. The big thing for me about kids and screens is to keep in mind that your ultimate goal is that they moderate themselves. It's not that they follow your rules. It's great if they follow your rules, but what you want is the kid who can walk out your door and head to their freshman year of college and deal with their own phone and Fortnite and whatnot.
Right.
And maybe, manage to attend class.
And they have to learn that on their own.
They totally do. And you want them to screw it up while they're in your house.
Right. Yeah.
And that's true of so many things. We want them to make their mistakes while we're still while we're here to help them figure out how to deal with the mistake. If you don't sort of raise the fences enough for them to back the car into a dumpster, then, when they do it and they're 25, they're not going to know what to do.
Right.
You've got to give the kid a chance to, forget their homework or screw up a class or make some pretty big mistakes while they're living at home, and you can help them sort of work their way through it.
I do want to talk a little bit about anxiety. You left your position at the New York Times and have gone on to create this amazing book, this super popular podcast. Were you anxious about leaving the stable environment for the life of a freelancer?
Yes. And this gets a little complicated. I left for a lot of reasons. They weren't entirely to write this book. I struggled a lot with the feeling of not having the stamp of approval on my forehead, because when you can tell someone that you're, and still, I'm still a contributor at the Times. As it turns out, I haven't really lost that, but especially in the period when I stopped regularly running what had become Well Family and even regularly contributing to it, I really felt very lost. And that was a big piece of my identity. That was definitely scary. And I spent a lot of time at night sort of churning over the chain of events that had led to it and trying to figure out what I could have done differently or could do differently. In retrospect, it all worked out fine. And I'm very happy with where I am. I love the book and I love my plans for what I'm doing next. And I'm still contributing at the Times, and it is all worked out, but it didn't necessarily feel like it would at the time. There was a particular drive. Every time when I hit point A on the drive, I would begin to churn through, well, if this just hadn't happened and this just hadn't happened, and if I hadn't said that, and if this had happened a little fast, and it would sort of go on to a particular part of the drive. And I finally had to just sort of spot that and just go, I'm going to play loud music because this is not helping anyone. So yeah, that was not fun. That we will not chalk that up as one of the more fun, exciting moments of my life.
But look where you've come now. I mean, you're doing videos on Facebook Facebook. You're still communicating with this audience that you built there and cultivated there.
Well, and I still contribute there. I work with the Sunday review section, and it's been beautiful, and I can contribute to Well Family. Doors are still open. It's just that I don't sort of have that regular paycheck, and I did like that regular paycheck.
Sure.
And I did, like I said, I liked having that stamp of approval on my forehead. It sure makes people call you back. It turns out having done it also works pretty well. But I'm also trying to do fiction, so you want that. There's some anxiety.
That's
too.
great.
Yeah, that's all new for me.
I think you're going to do just fine.
I hope so.
I'm curious if you have any advice for dealing with and comforting children with anxieties. My daughter, for instance, has a lot of anxieties surrounding sleeping. She's 9 and we're kind of working through it, but I'm curious if you have any advice in that realm.
So a lot of the time, kids with anxieties it doesn't play out as, hello, I'm feeling anxious about sleeping. Can you help me? It plays out more as, I'm not going to bed. You're mean. This is, I didn't get my homework done, so I can't go to bed because I'll never get my homework done. I'm going to flunk math. And then you sort of go down the road of, well, no, you're not going to flunk math. And really, step one is sort of recognizing, wait a minute. This is not about math, and it's not about me being mean. There's something else going on here. Most of us are in the middle of the back to school transition right now. Kids for whom transitions make them anxious, that's extraordinarily common. It might be a kid with, emotional or learning disabilities, and it just might be like a normal thing. But so a lot of us right now are seeing these behaviors that we thought were gone are popping back up. Right? So wait, I thought we were over stabbing your brother with the fork during dinner, or, I thought we were sort of over these instant fire off tantrums when nothing happened other than me reminding that you didn't put your dish in the dishwasher. To sort of take that step back and go, oh, this is about going to bed, or this is about going back to school next week. And that sort of enables you to remove your own emotional reaction, which is more like, you have to sleep because sleep makes you healthy. And also, if you don't go to bed right now, I'm going to die because I need some space. So you have to find a way to sort of back yourself up from that is really step one for helping them deal with it. And then you kind of have to sort of start to explore, what are the different ways that this child is going to allow you to talk about this issue without just making it worse.
I've found that just letting her share her feelings has been the big thing. She doesn't know that anxiety is anxiety. She just knows that she's scared someone might break in the house, or she's scared that, there'll be a fire, or she won't be able to sleep. So I think you're right. The advice is let them kind of come to you and figure it out together.
Yeah. The answer isn't, no one will break in the house. No, let me show you how the doors are locked. No, let me show you the fire alarm. That's not, the answer is more like, man, I really hear you. Oh, it must really be hard to worry about that all night. Is there anything else you want to tell me about the way that you feel when you go to bed at night? Maybe you can even get to like, is there any, what could make you feel better? Or another way to do it is sort of go down the silly road. Well, what if like 46 purple monsters broke in? I would hit them with an umbrella. What would you do? I mean, it's all about who the kid is and how old they are and that kind of thing. But, to be listening and be there with them as opposed to being with you and your sense of, I have failed this child. She thinks somebody's going to break into the house. She doesn't even feel safe and secure. Plus, I really need to go and have watch Game of Thrones. I can't do that while she's still awake because of the dragons and the red wedding. Just separating yourself and letting them have their anxiety without, sort of taking it into yourself or making them feel like they're spreading it to you. That's actually really huge.
She has this thing called a worry eater. I don't know if you've seen these now.
No.
It's basically like a little doll that has a zipper mouth. You open the zipper mouth and you write down your worries and you stick it in and he eats your worries.
Oh, that's awesome. I think I might need one of those.
Right? I think we all do.
It might need to be big, but life size.
You have an incredible podcast, #AmWriting. Did you and Jess ever imagine, when you started this, that you'd be doing 200 episodes, interviewing David Sedaris? It'd be as popular as it is now?
I don't think we did. Some of it came from us being really good friends who wanted to find an excuse to spend more time together. So we thought, well, we'll just stick a microphone in front of us and we'll talk about what we do. And we sort of started out as, well, we'd like to have a podcast. And I was thinking, well, we both write a lot about parenthood right now, but I don't know that we're both going to write about parenthood through our whole careers. So what can we talk about that's something that's going to stay consistent? And that was the answer. We're going to write different things as we grow and change and evolve, but we're never not going to be writers.
Right.
So when we've had such a good time with it, and it's also just grown, I think partly because we were doing it for the pure pleasure of talking to to each other and putting it out there, it's grown on its own. We've done next to nothing to sort of make it grow. And then now we're having this great moment where people are just very friendly and willing to go on podcasts. I don't know how long that will last. We get some surprising yeses, of whom David Sedaris was absolutely one, and he was lovely. Except he gave the worst advice to writers ever in history.
Well, that's kind of what David does, though.
It kind of is. The answer to David is, why you can't be David Sedaris is because no one else. Right. You can't do it like him. If he did it, you have to do something different. That's how this ends.
But you got the David Sedaris thank you note, which is the most important piece of the puzzle.
Just kept it, though.
What a good guy, right? What a good guy.
Yeah. He really is.
How do you manage to work that additional piece kind of into family and working and parenting and all the other things?
I'm just a very regimented person. I tend to do what I do at the time that I expected to do it. I get a little upset if it doesn't necessarily go that way. It often doesn't. So we have a really scheduled time when we have to do it. And the fact that we do it together or that we might have a guest makes it so much easier to be like, I'm sorry, I can't. I get that it's actually really important and you need 6 manila folders and a jar of olives and 3 purple markers to do your project for tomorrow, but I literally can't drive you because I'm going to interview David Sedaris. Once you sort of make it a date and you make it a thing and you refuse to compromise on it, it gets easier not to compromise on it. And then when you start to see that works for that, you start to go, this is my 2 hours of thinking and writing without any intrusion time and everybody out. You can't do that when your kids are 2. You need a babysitter when your kids are 2. But when they're older, you really can. And it's good for them.
Yeah, sure it is. At the end of your book, you do reiterate just kind of how much happier you are now that you've found this path and kind of this way that you talk about in the book. Do you think your kids and family are happier now too?
I know that I am easier to deal with when I'm happy. One of my friends once declared that his superpower was the black mood of doom, that he could spread the black mood of doom throughout his family faster than the speed of light. And I was like, man, I have that superpower. I can totally do that. So to have me either not feeling it or at least finding ways not to spread it is nice for everyone. To have sort of come up with these ways of dealing with things that we all find a little more challenging. Like, I don't think I was such a really dedicated planner before I started on this. And it sort of all played out together. So it's nice for them to know what's coming and when. I think they're happier. I think it's a trinity, like you said about the books. I think it goes happier parent, happier kid, happier family. Yeah. Happier parent, happier kid, happier family. I think our boats all, they all lift with the tide. So when we make it better, it gets better for everyone. It's easier to be happy around happier people.
It's true. It really is. Happiness is infectious.
Emotions are contagious.
It's
right?
true.
That's the way it works. Although that is an interesting thing that I learned from Lisa D'Amour. I am now flaking completely off. But Lisa D'Amour, who wrote this great book about adolescent girls, said that you need, and it kind of turned into don't go in there. I think we're kind of saying the same thing, but like just let them come and dump their giant bucket of emotions in front of you. You don't have to get a straw.
Yeah.
Just let it lay there.
What are some of the things that you do on a daily basis for self-care to take care of yourself and ward off those bad feelings?
I get up and run a mile every day. I actually just injured my shoulder, so I didn't do it this morning, but I have run like 200 miles. I have it written down somewhere. I keep track of it. So I've run, 197 miles already this year, but it's only a mile. I don't run further than a mile because I hate running. I don't run less than a mile. I just do that. So that it wakes me up. It gets me going. I have a pretty solid meditation practice, which is connected to that I usually meditate right after I run. It's kind of flaked off because as habits do when something intrudes and gets in the way. I hope to bring that back. I get enough sleep. I am really protective of my sleep. I go to bed. I'm so much happier if I've gotten enough sleep. So that's a huge thing that I do. And I finally sort of learned not to experience miseries that are not actually happening. And that is huge.
I think for a lot of anxious people, that's a turning point, just to be able to say, I can't control this, so let it go.
Yeah. Or, this isn't happening. I mean, this is only happening in my head.
Yeah.
There's so much happening in my head that, is not happening in real life. And I spend so much time in there with it. It's better if you can stop.
Tell the people where they can find you online.
Oh, well, you can find me easily at kjdell'antonia.com, or if you prefer, howtobeahappierparent.com also heads to me. I'm on Twitter at KJ Dell'Antonia. Facebook is the same. Instagram is at KJDA for whatever reason.
The Am Writing podcast you can find anywhere you listen to podcasts.
Absolutely. It's conveniently #AmWriting, so it's first alphabetically in almost every list.
Well, the book is absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. This was a really fun conversation.
Call us, leave us a message at 732-903-4441, or drop us an email at anxietydiariespodcast@gmail.com. You can find the podcast at www.anxietydiariespodcast.com, where you can sign up for our newsletter as well. And you can find us on Instagram and Facebook at Anxiety Diaries Podcast. We're also on Twitter at Anxiety Diary Pod. Thanks again for listening. Be well, and we'll see you next week.